This episode is brought to you by Progressive, home of the Name Your Price tool. You say how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. It's easy to start a quote. Visit Progressive.com to get started. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. And the great AJ Jacobs is back, host of the podcast The Puzzler, author of the book The Puzzler, among many other great books. Now, last episode, AJ talked about the very first crossword puzzle, which appeared in 1913, right before World War I. And now we go to World War II to talk about puzzles in the 40s. And as it happens, there are all sorts of interesting ways that puzzles intersect with the war and that era. So AJ is going to talk with us about a few of them. Welcome back to the show, AJ. Thanks for doing a second episode with us.
I am delighted to be here.
And yes, go check out The Puzzler, hosted by AJ, produced by me. Wonderful show. But here, as always, Nicole Hammer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hi, Jody.
Hey there.
And I guess we should point out for listeners that this is our December 24th episode, and so I guess we're calling this our Christmas episode. And, we don't have a Christmas-specific hook here, but AJ, tell me, it seems to me like the holiday season and the war and puzzles do intersect in an interesting way. And one way they do is, let's start with this memo that is written at the New York Times in December of 1941. And we mentioned in the last episode that the Times was reluctant to get into the crossword game. But now, a sort of generation later, during the war, around the Christmas holiday season, there's this memo that goes out inside the Times that basically makes the case, as I read it, that says like, hey, our readers are kind of struggling this holiday season. Maybe a crossword can help cheer them up or something.
Yeah, that is my interpretation as well. As we mentioned last episode, the Times was one of the only papers that did not print crosswords. Instead, they printed articles about what a scourge on society it was and how it was wasting people's time. And the Times was, even back then, kind of snooty, so they felt that it was too frivolous. But then, Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, I got that date right. That would be embarrassing. Mm-hmm. Okay.
It is a date that lives in infamy.
Yeah, I would live in infamy if I got it wrong.
Yeah.
Less than 2 weeks after that, this editor at the New York Times sent a memo saying, it is possible there will now be bleak blackout hours, or if not that, then certainly a need for relaxation of some kind or another. And he said, I think we have to go ahead with the crossword puzzle. And actually, the publisher, Arthur Sulzberger, was a fan of crosswords. He just didn't think that they were fit to print. But then he changed his mind, and a little more than a year later, in February of 1942, came the very first New York Times crossword puzzle, and it has since become the market leader. Right. They were late to the game, but they kind of took over.
Well, did they suffer for being late to the game?
Not really, because they hired, one of their great moves was hiring a genius named Margaret Petheridge Farrar, who has a great name, and she's a legend in the crossword community. She actually had come from these two guys in the 1920s named Simon and Schuster. Decided to print crossword puzzles. Like, that was they didn't have a business. It was not a publisher. Their whole business was built on crosswords. And they hired her as an editor. So she came from Simon and Schuster and took over the New York Times. And as I say, she's a legend because she introduced all these reforms. She cleaned them up. There used to be all these mistakes. She made the grid symmetrical, which is very important for some puzzlers. I don't really care that much. She said no two-letter words. That's cheating. So she had all of these. And in that initial memo that we talked about, he said, the editor said, I don't think we should do anything radically different. We should just be the best at it. We should do it better, was his phrase. And I think they did.
That memo takes me back to the early days of the pandemic when everyone was kind of stuck at home. That idea of these bleak blackout hours.
Yep.
We were doing jigsaw puzzles. The New York Times at that time ran, usually in the holidays, they run this big games insert that has all these different kinds of puzzles, mainly aimed at kids, but kind of for the whole family. And because of the pandemic, they were like, people need puzzles and games to distract themselves and fill their time, and parents need something to do with their kids. And so they had run this enormous games insert, months earlier than they normally do. And I totally get that sense of, look, people are coming up on hard times, and they're going to need something to pass the time, and they're going to need something to distract them, which feels just like a very familiar thought process after the last 3 years.
Yeah, because you really can't focus on anything else while you're trying to solve a crossword puzzle. For me, it's Sudoku. I like Sudoku too. But if it's any one of these things, words with friends, whatever, I love them all. I'm so laser focused on getting something right because I'm super competitive when it comes to games. I definitely tune out. And for me, sometimes I think that's a good thing.
Same.
Point, AJ, actually, and this is a little to the side. I was thinking about asking this last episode too, but is there a tension there between this as distraction and then clearly, I mean, you went deep into this world and I'm getting a taste of it by making the puzzle podcast, but there's also clearly a whole group of puzzlers who do not think of this as distraction. They think of this as blood sport, right? And so
take them down.
Was that there from the beginning too?
Well, yes, because you had the people saying it's a moral panic, but then you also had very early on people saying that puzzles teach us. That's been a theme since the Middle Ages. They said, puzzles to sharpen the young mind. It was one of the first puzzle books ever in the 1600s, something. So you had that tension early on. I will say one fascinating thing to go back to the distraction away from World War II. Weirdly, if they wanted to, and if the Times' goal was to distract, they did not do the best job because the very first clue, one across in the very first New York Times crossword puzzle, was about World War II. It was famous one-eyed general. The answer was 6 letters, and it was this guy Wavell, a British general who lost his eye in World War I and was heading up troops in World War II. And there were several World War II and Nazi-related clues. So it was a very interesting choice. But you had told me earlier, Nicole, that you actually did the puzzle. So can you tell us about what was that like?
Yes. Well, I'm about 3/4
not in
of the
1942.
way through doing it. No, I did not do it in 1942. I'm neither a time machine nor a magic potion. But it's actually fascinating. First of all, there are tons of World War II related clues. Like the Nazis are brought up a lot. So it doesn't quite take you out of the wartime era. The thing that I was so struck by, first of all, always crossword puzzles are products of their time. I often buy these crossword puzzle collections from the New York Times, and even ones from the 1990s or 2000s, the references have shifted just enough to make them much more difficult because you don't have at the tip of your tongue a particular movie or song or television show that would have been easily accessible if you were living in that time. So I definitely noticed that kind of product of its timeness. But also, you had mentioned on the last show, AJ, the thing about the cleverness of the clues for a crossword. I had an ex-boyfriend of mine who was a very literal thinker, and this drove him insane, especially for the Sunday New York Times crosswords, which are particularly clever. He's like, that's not what that means. And I'm like, well, if you think about it this way, he's like, no, that's not what it means. And this he would have loved this crossword puzzle because it really is no, we went to the dictionary and this was the definition they gave us, and that is what we made as the clue. And now you can solve it based on the dictionary definition of this word.
But is it the third definition down? You know how in the dictionary it's meaning 1, meaning 2, meaning 3.
I mean, I think that they do that a little more now than they did. I think there was one in here that the clue was suffer and the answer was let. And that's kind of the second or third definition of, to suffer someone. And so that was the only one that had that kind of little twist of cleverness. But most of all, it's very straightforward.
You're used to hearing my voice on the world, bringing you interviews from around the globe.
And you hear me reporting environment and climate news. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. We're now with you hosting the world together. More global journalism with a fresh new sound.
Listen to The World on your local public radio station and wherever you find your podcasts.
That actually is a good segue to the second World War II story, because there was a split. It's become less, but there was a split between American crosswords and British crosswords up until the 80s. And American crosswords were much more trivia-oriented, and British crosswords were all about crazy wordplay, anagrams, looking at things upside down. And there was a very famous puzzle the same year as the New York Times first puzzle that appeared in the British paper, The Telegraph. And I argue this is the crossword that helped save the free world, because it said, if you solve this puzzle in 12 minutes or less, contact this number. And it turned out that the puzzle was a recruiting tool for the codebreakers at Bletchley Park, which was the British spy outfit that helped crack the Nazi code, the Enigma code.
Wow.
So, and the trick was that all of these clues were super twisty. So I will tell you, we are very lucky that the fate of the world did not rest on me, because I could not solve this puzzle in 12 hours, much less 12 minutes. But I'll give you one example of the kind of clue that they used. So, all right, so 17 across in this famous crossword puzzle is this town ready for a flood? Is this town ready for a flood? The answer is 6 letters. And again, I would never have gotten this in all my life, but I'll walk you through it.
Okay.
When you think of a flood, maybe, what's the most famous flood you can think of?
Noah's Ark.
No, yeah.
And what did Noah? What did he need? What to get ready for the flood? What did he do?
The ark.
Exactly. So ark is in there, but if you are a town that's ready for a flood, you don't want an old ark. You want a
Newark.
Newark.
Newark?
I love your outrage.
Ready for
I was going to say Arkansas, like Newark.
Newark. Yeah.
Newark.
Right.
So yeah,
I'm
you
into
can
it.
quibble. You can quibble with it, but
the world would have been
hey.
over.
But AJ, I mean, you went into this story in your book, and I've encountered this story kind of. It's a legendary story. It's in that movie, The Imitation Game, right? Where especially I think that woman, Joan Clark, is that her name, shows up, and no one believes that she solved it as fast as she did. Every time I encounter this story, my apocryphal story sensors go off. I mean, how real is this story? I mean, was it really the case that they found they recruited through crossword puzzles?
I did try to fact check it as much as I could. I don't know if they were the top one. I mean, Alan Turing was not recruited through a crossword puzzle. And it's actually a little messier because, as is always the case in history, they announced a crossword tournament. So there was a room of people, and they had to solve it in 12 minutes or less. And then the puzzle was printed the next day in the newspaper. So it wasn't like people were reading it on the underground and was like, oh, I'm a genius. I'm a cryptographer in the making. But as far as I can tell, it did happen, and they did recruit at least some code breakers. So that's enough for me to say it saved the world.
Kind of amazing.
It is.
Isn't there another story, if we're kind of cruising through some World War II anecdotes and tidbits, isn't there another story about a guy who wrote a crossword and people thought he was giving away secrets in his crossword? Is that right? I feel like you mentioned that on the Puzzler one time.
Yeah, that one also not apocryphal. This was the same newspaper, The Telegraph in Britain, in 1945, and they printed a series of crossword puzzles that happened to come out in the days leading up to D-Day, the Normandy invasion. And the problem was that several of the answers in those crosswords were top secret code words related to D-Day. So Utah was in there, which was a beach. Omaha was a beach.
Oh, boy.
Neptune was the naval portion of D-Day. Weirdest of all was Overlord, not a normal word you hear. And that was the code name for the entire D-Day operation, Overlord, Operation Overlord.
No one flagged this?
Well, they did.
Well, they did flag it.
Not at the paper, because they didn't know.
Right.
But the British Secret Service noticed, and they flipped out, and they actually arrested the crossword maker, who was this quiet school headmaster named Leonard Daw, and they interrogated him extensively. In the end, he was released, and they decided at the time that it was just a weird coincidence. There are still in the crossword community some conspiracy theorists who say it was not a coincidence. And one theory is that the school was located near some sort of military facility, and the kids would help him write it. And the kids overheard
the words.
the soldiers saying these words.
But wait.
I don't know.
The real takeaway from this story is that in the days leading up to D-Day, the people in charge of the top secret plans were sitting around doing crossword puzzles.
I know.
How would they have noticed otherwise?
Can't work 24/7, Jody.
I suppose.
That's
your
right.
time away.
Yeah.
This is why the world is coming to an end.
Just making their minds sharper, Jody, as
I
I've
suppose
argued.
so.
It was good for them.
All right. Well, AJ, as we start to wrap up here, I mean, I'm going to try really hard to somehow make this our Christmas episode. But talk to us, in a bigger sense. You touched on it a little bit last episode. But talk to us in a bigger sense about kind of what this era of crosswords teaches us about how, as you say, a puzzle mindset can bring people together. Do you have any recommendations for puzzles for people to do around this Christmas holiday season? This is your chance. You have the floor to sing the praises of puzzling.
I will stretch the puzzle as far as it can go and say, yeah, it can save us from fascism. That's my which we need more than ever right now.
That's true.
And I do think it can bring people together. In my book, I cited a study by Cass Sunstein, who's a Harvard law professor and behavioral economist, and he talked about a study that he did where they had liberals and conservatives, and that one of the only activities that brought them together was solving a crossword puzzle. So having a common goal really is super important. So yeah, that's my holiday message, that we should all work together to solve our big problems, like whether it's 14 down or whether it's a radical climate change.
20 years from now, you're going to issue an updated version of your book, and there will be a new chapter, The Puzzle That Defeated Fascism, and it's going to be amazing. So I look forward to that update.
You're gonna win the Nobel Peace Prize.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
And I, of course, will do the shameless plug that one part of that project is listening to The Puzzler, which AJ hosts every day.
Yes.
I'm one of the producers on it. It's very fun. And, if you haven't heard the show yet, holiday season is a great time to go listen to it and listen to the archives and maybe, learn some puzzles and then take them to your friends and give them to them. But anyway.
Hot tip. Listen
yeah.
to them from the start to the finish, right? Start with the oldest rather than the newest, because they give you a little puzzle at the end of each one, and then they tell you to answer it during the next one.
There you go. That's how we get you coming
No
back every
spoilers.
day.
Thank you,
Yes,
Nicole.
Thank you,
Thank
Nicole. All right. Well, AJ, this has been really, really fun. Congratulations on the new show. Thank you so much for joining us. And I will do a very early tease that your next book is about the Constitution, and that's coming out in the spring, right? And so we're definitely going to have you back for that, because that is right in our wheelhouse on politics. So,
I would love it.
Yeah,
Yes, that would be
All
fantastic.
right. Well, happy holidays to you, AJ Jacobs. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. I had a great time. It was as fun as doing a crossword, if not more fun.
Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to This Day in Esoteric Political History. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. Our transcripts, which you can find on our website, are done by Kala Nakua. This Day is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, creator-owned, listener-supported podcasts. Audrey Martovich is executive producer. Yuri Lasordo is director of operations. If you want to support the show, tell a friend about This Day and become a member of Radiotopia at whatever level works for you. You can do that at our website, thisdaypod.com. Also on our site, you can find transcripts, sign up for our newsletter, find links to follow us on Instagram and Threads, buy merch like shirts and hats and phone cases, find information about our theme song, give feedback on an episode we've done, or suggest topics for a future episode. That and lots more, thisdaypod.com. My name is Jody Avirgan. We'll see you soon. Support for This Day in Esoteric Political History comes from Odoo. What is Odoo? Well, Odoo is an all-in-one management software with apps for every business need. Odoo has apps for CRM, accounting, sales, HR, inventory, manufacturing, and everything in between. And they're all in one easy-to-use software. And the best part about Odoo? All Odoo apps are integrated, helping you get things done faster and more efficiently. So, when you think about business, think Odoo. To learn more, visit odoo.com/thisday. That's ODOO.com/thisday.
Radiotopia from P